1726, in the quiet fields of Surrey, a poor Englishwoman named Mary Toft convinced some of the most respected physicians in Britain that she had given birth to rabbits. What followed was not merely a grotesque curiosity, but a national crisis of belief, a collision between science and superstition, class and credibility, spectacle and authority. This is the story of how an entire system, medical, political, religious, briefly bent itself around something impossible, and why, at the time, it made perfect sense. Because in 18th century England, truth was not just discovered, it was performed. You are standing in a cramped cottage in Godalming, Surrey. The air smells of damp straw and iron. A woman is screaming, and the midwife is holding something that should not exist. Not a child, a rabbit. And this is where our story begins. It's September 1726. You're inside a low-roofed cottage near Guildford in southern England. The plaster walls sweat in the late summer humidity. A single candle trembles on a rough wooden table. The smell is thick, straw, wool, smoke, and the sour trace of labor. Mary Toft is 20-something. Records suggest she was born around 1701, though exact dates are debated. She is poor, illiterate, already a mother. She's been in labor for days. Outside, fields stretch toward the River Wey. Harvest season is close. England is not starving, but it is never far from hunger. Rural families live close to the margin. Inside the room, a midwife reaches between Mary's legs, and instead of a human infant, she draws out the partial body of a rabbit, small, bloody, unmistakably animal. The room falls silent. Now imagine the sound of that silence, because in that silence sits a question that will ripple all the way to London. How can this be? Before we rush to judgment, pause. This is early 18th century England. The year is 1726, the same year Jonathan Swift publishes Gulliver's Travels. King George I sits on the throne. The Enlightenment is stirring, but it hasn't yet solidified into modern science. Medicine exists, but without anesthesia, without germ theory, without modern obstetrics. Childbirth is dangerous. Maternal mortality is common. Miscarriages are frequent. Deformities are poorly understood. And here is something crucial. There is a widely accepted theory called maternal impression. It holds that what a pregnant woman sees, fears, or obsesses over can physically mark or shape the fetus in her womb. If she is startled by a dog, perhaps the child will bear a mark like a bite. If she craves strawberries and is denied, perhaps the child will bear a red birthmark. If she fixates on a rabbit, you see where this is going. Mary Toft will later claim that during pregnancy, she became obsessed with rabbits after being startled by one in a field. To us, this sounds absurd, but in 1726, it sits within accepted medical theory. And that is the first key. This did not begin as madness. It began inside a system of belief. But here's what most people miss. The first rabbit was not the only one. Over the following weeks, Mary would reportedly deliver multiple animal parts, rabbits, pieces of cats, even fragments described in surviving accounts as animal organs. Local surgeon John Howard of Guildford was summoned. He did not laugh. He examined. He collected specimens. He wrote letters. Now the story begins to move. And here's where it gets complicated. Because once a medically trained man commits himself to an impossible claim, he must either double down or admit humiliation. Howard chose to double down. He informed other physicians that this case might prove maternal impression true beyond doubt. Imagine that for a moment. Not fraud, not hysteria, scientific breakthrough. If this feels familiar, consider modern viral medical claims. A biotech startup announces a revolutionary cure. Early tests are thin, but respected scientists attach their names. Investors join. Media amplifies. And suddenly, skepticism feels like jealousy. In 1726, pamphlets were the social media of their day, and England loved the spectacle. By October 1726, written statements about Mary Toft's deliveries were circulating. John Howard sent reports to London physicians. Eventually, even Nathaniel St, André, surgeon to King George I, would become involved. But at this early stage, the events remain local, confined to Godalming and Guildford in Surrey. The rabbits themselves were dissected. Reports claimed some contained undigested grain, suggesting they had lived, not formed in a womb. Yet somehow, the contradiction did not immediately end the case. Why? Because belief does not collapse at the first crack, especially when reputation is at stake. Remember this line: when knowledge is uncertain, power performs certainty. And power is beginning to gather around this cottage. Now, picture the village, neighbors whispering, men removing hats in confusion, women crossing themselves, children trying to peek through the doorway. Some are horrified, some are thrilled, some see divine warning, some see profit, because if this is real, it rewrites the understanding of nature itself. And if it is fake, the consequences will be brutal. A poor woman in Surrey claims to give birth to rabbits. A local surgeon validates her. Existing medical theory makes it plausible. Specimens are collected. Letters are sent. And a rural anomaly begins its journey toward the heart of British power. Within weeks, the story will reach London. Coffee houses will buzz. Newspapers will speculate. And members of the royal court will demand answers. Because this is no longer about one woman. It is about whether England's leading physicians can tell the difference between nature and impossibility. And once the capital is watching, failure is no longer private. London, autumn 1726. A coffee house near St. Paul's Cathedral hums with conversation. Ink-stained pamphlets lie unfolded beside porcelain cups. A man reads aloud, "A woman in Surrey hath brought forth rabbits." Laughter, then silence. Then someone says very quietly, "What if it's true?" It's 1726, and you're walking through rural Surrey at dawn. The fields are silver with mist. Your boots sink slightly into damp earth. The air smells of manure, hay, wood smoke drifting from low chimneys. A church bell tolls in the distance, steady, indifferent. Life here is physical. You rise with the sun. You work with your hands. You depend on weather. Illness is not an abstraction. It is a household threat. Childbirth happens at home, in rooms like Mary Toft's, with midwives, not hospitals. There are no ultrasounds, no antiseptics, no reliable way to see inside the human body without opening it. The body is a mystery, and mystery invites meaning. Now imagine hearing that a woman nearby has delivered rabbits. It sounds impossible. But does it sound impossible enough to dismiss outright? Or just strange enough to worry about? To understand why people didn't immediately reject Mary Toft's claim, we need to understand how 18th century England viewed the body. In 1726, medicine stands between worlds. The scientific revolution has already produced figures like Newton. anatomy schools exist, dissection is practiced. And yet, older ideas remain embedded. The theory of maternal impression is widely discussed in medical texts. The belief that a mother's imagination shapes the fetus is not fringe. It appears in learned treatises. Why? Because there are unexplained phenomena everywhere: birth defects, stillbirths, malformations, conjoined twins. Without genetics, without embryology, how do you explain them? You explain them with imagination. And here's the unsettling part. The theory also reinforces social control. If a baby is born deformed, the mother's thoughts are suspect. Was she frightened? Did she sin? Did she crave too much? The female body becomes a stage upon which morality plays out. Mary Toft's alleged rabbit births did not erupt into a vacuum. They landed in a culture already anxious about women's bodies. But there's another layer. England in the 1720s is politically tense. The Hanoverian succession is still relatively new. King George I, a German-born monarch, is not universally loved. Jacobite sympathies linger. Trust in institutions is fragile. And this matters. Because when a society feels uncertain at the top, it becomes hypersensitive at the margins. Strange events feel symbolic. What if this rabbit woman is a sign, a warning, a curiosity that reveals deeper disorder? And here's where it gets complicated. England is also becoming a print culture powerhouse. Cheap pamphlets circulate widely. Newspapers expand. Coffee houses function as information hubs. A story no longer stays in Surrey. It travels. And once it travels, it changes shape. A local medical oddity becomes a national question. Are England's doctors competent or gullible? That is a dangerous question in a society trying to prove itself modern. Imagine a viral medical clip today, a supposed miracle birth, a strange mutation, a blurry hospital video. At first, it's a curiosity. Then experts comment. Then influencers amplify. Then skeptics clash with believers. And suddenly, it's not about the event anymore. It's about credibility. In 1726, pamphlets were the trending tab, and coffee houses were the comment section. Records show that by October 1726, accounts of Mary Toft's case were circulating in London papers. Physicians debated it in private correspondence. Surgeons requested specimens. Some anatomists examined rabbit parts reportedly delivered by Mary and claimed they showed signs of having been inside a human body. Others quietly doubted. Historians debate how quickly skepticism formed. Some sources suggest suspicion was present almost immediately. Others show a surprising degree of initial belief. What is clear is this: no major authority immediately dismissed it as absurd, and that hesitation tells us something profound. Because think about the alternative. If doctors dismiss the case without investigation, and it turns out to be true, they risk missing a medical revolution. But if they investigate and it turns out to be false, they risk humiliation. Which risk is greater? In a culture where reputation is everything? Medicine in 1726 is competitive. Physicians, surgeons, and midwives occupy overlapping but unequal social tiers. Physicians are university-trained and elite. Surgeons are practical, hands-on, closer to tradesmen. Midwives operate in female networks, often excluded from formal authority. Mary Toft's case sits at the intersection of all three. If true, it would validate theories many physicians defend. If false, it would expose professional rivalry and incompetence. And here's something crucial. Medical authority is still fragile. Hospitals are limited. Scientific consensus is slow. Anatomy is impressive, but not omniscient. So when something bizarre emerges, the system doesn't have firm guardrails. It improvises. And when knowledge is uncertain, power performs certainty. Now picture Mary herself during this early phase, still in Surrey, still under observation, still producing, allegedly, more rabbit parts. Her body becomes a site of examination. Men arrive, specimens are handled, letters are drafted. Her poverty becomes secondary to her utility, because if she is genuine, she is a medical marvel, and if she is not, she is a threat. England in 1726 fears the unpredictability of the body. Maternal impression theory makes the rabbit birth plausible. Political tension amplifies strange stories. Print culture spreads them rapidly. Medical authority feels both curious and vulnerable. And Mary Toft's cottage is no longer just a cottage. It is a testing ground for truth. Soon, London's most respected medical figures will step into this case, not just to observe, but to stake their reputations on it, because the story has reached the capital. And once the capital is watching, someone must decide what is real. A man in a dark wool coat leans over a wooden table. On the table lies the body of a small rabbit. He does not recoil. He does not laugh. He picks up a scalpel and he begins to cut. It's late September 1726. You are standing inside Mary Toft's cottage again. But this time, the room feels different, less chaotic, more clinical. The air is thick with the metallic scent of blood and the sharper tang of open flesh. A candle burns low. The flame bends with each draft that sneaks through the warped door frame. John Howard, a local surgeon from Guildford, removes his gloves, if gloves can be called that. Rough fabric, not sterile. Nothing in this room is sterile. He has already witnessed something extraordinary. Mary has reportedly delivered animal parts in his presence. Not rumors, not second-hand accounts. He says he saw them. Now you watch him examine one of the rabbits. He turns it carefully, studies the fur, the limbs, the entrails. He is not seeking shock. He is seeking proof. And this is the moment the case changes. Because once a medical professional engages seriously, the spectacle becomes evidence. John Howard was not a royal physician. He was not a London intellectual. He was a provincial surgeon. That matters. In 1726, surgeons occupy a complicated position. They are trained through apprenticeship, not elite universities. They perform manual procedures, amputations, wound care, dissections. They are practical men, but they lack the social prestige of physicians. So imagine the opportunity, a case that could prove a debated medical theory, a case that could elevate his name beyond Surrey. Howard begins documenting what he observes. Records suggest he sent letters to other physicians describing Mary Toft's deliveries. He preserved specimens. He testified that the rabbit parts appeared to have been produced through her body. Now here's the unsettling part. He believed her. Or at least, he believed what he saw. Why? Because the framework to reject it wasn't solid. Maternal impression theory allowed for extraordinary outcomes. Animal parts inside a womb. Unlikely, but impossible. That word didn't yet carry the weight it does today. And here's what most people miss. Howard was not reckless. He was methodical. He claimed to observe Mary during labor. He attempted to ensure she had no access to outside animal carcasses. He tried to rule out trickery. From his perspective, he was investigating, not indulging fantasy. But investigation under limited knowledge can look like complicity. And that's when everything shifts. Because once Howard sends his letters, London answers. And here's where it gets complicated. When a rural surgeon reports a phenomenon that could redefine obstetrics, London cannot ignore it. To ignore it risks appearing arrogant. To embrace it risks appearing foolish. So they choose a third option. They will see it for themselves. Think of a local scientist today claiming a breakthrough discovery. Maybe cold fusion in a garage lab. Maybe a revolutionary AI built by a small startup. At first, the academic elite watches cautiously. But if the claim gains traction, prestigious institutions must respond. Not because they believe it, but because ignoring it is reputationally dangerous. Howard's letters function like an early preprint paper, and London's medical community feels the pressure. By October 1726, Howard's communications reached physicians in London. Among those who became involved was Nathaniel St. André, surgeon and anatomist to King George I. That detail is critical. The case is no longer provincial. It now brushes against royal authority. Additionally, some of the rabbits reportedly delivered were dissected, and observers claimed signs that they had developed inside a mammalian body. Other observers later argued these findings were misinterpreted, that the rabbits had simply been inserted. Historians debate how controlled Howard's examinations truly were. Sources disagree on how closely Mary was supervised, but we know this. Multiple deliveries were claimed between September and November 1726, and Howard publicly defended their authenticity. Now picture Mary during this phase. She is watched, examined, monitored. Her pain, whether genuine labor pains or something else, becomes performance. And here's the psychological tension. If she is fabricating this, she must maintain control under scrutiny. If she is not fabricating this, she is trapped in something she cannot explain. Either way, the stakes are rising, because London is coming. In 1726, there are no forensic protocols, no controlled clinical environments, no standardized peer review. Evidence is witnessed, described, believed, or doubted. And belief, in this era, still carries weight equal to measurement. When Howard states that he personally saw rabbit parts delivered from Mary's body, his testimony matters. He is a man of trade, a professional. To accuse him of gullibility is to accuse a whole class of practitioners of incompetence, which makes disbelief socially costly. When knowledge is uncertain, power performs certainty. Howard's certainty becomes contagious, but doubt is already forming, quietly. Some physicians question the anatomical details. How could fully formed rabbit parts exist in a human uterus? How could multiple animals develop sequentially? Why do some specimens contain undigested food? Those questions hover, but they do not yet dominate, because spectacle is louder than skepticism. John Howard investigates Mary Toft's alleged rabbit births. He witnesses, collects, and defends the evidence. He communicates with London. The case escalates from rural oddity to national medical inquiry, and doubt begins to whisper, but not yet shout. Soon, Mary Toft will be transported to London itself, placed under elite supervision, observed by the King's own surgeon, and once she stands in the capital under brighter lights, the performance, or the miracle, will either solidify or collapse. A carriage rattles over cobblestones. Inside, wrapped in blankets, sits Mary Toft. Outside, London waits. It's November 1726. You're standing on a narrow London street near Leicester Fields. The air smells of coal smoke and wet stone. Horses snort. Wheels grind against mud. Vendors shout. Somewhere, a bell tolls the hour. London is not quiet like Surrey. It hums. Coffee houses overflow with debate. Pamphlets are hawked at corners. Gossip travels faster than horses. And today, the gossip has a body. Mary Toft has arrived. She is lodged under supervision so physicians can observe her directly. No more countryside ambiguity. No more reliance on letters from Guildford. Now the capital will witness the phenomenon firsthand. Now imagine the tension, because if she produces another rabbit here, under scrutiny, the implications are explosive. And if she doesn't, someone's reputation is about to shatter. London in 1726 is the largest city in Britain and one of the largest in Europe. Roughly 600,000 people crowd its streets. It is a place of ideas and insecurity. The Enlightenment is reshaping intellectual life. The Royal Society has been active for decades. Experimental philosophy is admired. But medicine is still inconsistent. Physicians debate humours and anatomy side by side. Dissection theatres attract crowds. Curiosity is not shameful. In fact, curiosity is fashionable. And that matters, because Mary Toft's case becomes fashionable curiosity. Printed broadsides circulate. Satirical illustrations begin to appear. Coffee houses discuss it alongside politics and trade. This is early media virality, and London loves nothing more than a spectacle that challenges authority. Here's what most people miss. The case is no longer just about biology. It is about national pride. If England's leading physicians validate a fraud, rival nations will mock them. If they dismiss a genuine phenomenon, they risk missing a discovery. This is not just a medical puzzle. It is reputational brinkmanship. Now we reach a turning point. Nathaniel St, surgeon and anatomist to King George I, becomes involved. He examines Mary personally. He observes what he believes are further animal deliveries. He writes publicly defending the authenticity of the case. That detail is crucial. A royal affiliated surgeon is now endorsing the rabbit births, which means the case brushes the monarchy itself. And in 1726, monarchy is not symbolic. It is stabilizing. If Saint André is wrong, the embarrassment extends upward. When knowledge is uncertain, power performs certainty, and Saint André performs it confidently. But here's where it gets complicated. Not all London physicians agree. Sir Richard Manningham, a prominent obstetrician, begins to harbour doubts. He does not immediately accuse. Instead, he tightens observation. Mary is watched more closely. Servants are monitored. Access is restricted. Because if this is fraud, it must involve assistance. And fraud at this scale would require planning. The room grows smaller, the scrutiny sharper. Think of a celebrity scandal today. At first, insiders defend it. Public statements are confident. Press releases are polished. But behind the scenes, investigations intensify. Phones are examined. Contracts reviewed. People watched. The performance continues, but pressure builds underneath. Mary Toft is now at the center of a crisis management scenario, 18th century style. Except she is not a celebrity. She is a poor woman surrounded by powerful men. In November 1726, Mary Toft was brought to London and examined by several prominent physicians, including Nathaniel St and Sir Richard Manningham. St. André published a short narrative of an extraordinary delivery of rabbits in late November, defending the case. That publication matters. It formalizes belief. It moves the case from rumor to printed assertion. Meanwhile, skeptics quietly prepare. Historians note that Mary was placed under controlled observation at Lacey's Banio in Leicester Fields, a detail that underscores the seriousness of the inquiry. This was not a sideshow tent. It was monitored medical evaluation. Now imagine the emotional atmosphere in that room. Candlelight flickering on anxious faces. Doctors whispering. Mary breathing heavily. Every movement scrutinized. Is she in pain? Is she acting? Is she afraid? If she is orchestrating a deception, she must now maintain it under elite examination. If she is not, she is surrounded by doubt. Either way, the walls are closing in. Public fascination intensifies. Satirical prints begin mocking physicians. Writers speculate. Some call it divine judgment. Others call it monstrous birth. And a subtle shift occurs. The focus moves from the rabbits to the doctors. Are they fools or pioneers? And once that question dominates, the system itself is on trial. Mary Toft arrives in London. Royal surgeon Nathaniel St defends her case publicly. Skeptical physicians tighten supervision. Pamphlets spread the story nationwide. The spectacle grows, and the margin for error disappears. Soon, under intensified watch, the deliveries will stop. Doubts will harden into accusation, and someone, finally, will force a confession. But before that moment arrives, we must confront a harder question. Was Mary Toft the architect of this deception, or a product of the system that made it possible? A pamphlet hits a printing press. Ink presses into paper. The title reads, "A short narrative of an extraordinary delivery of rabbits. A royal surgeon has taken a side, and now he cannot step back." It's late November 1726. You're standing inside a candlelit room in Leicester Fields. Outside, carriage wheels scrape the wet London streets. Inside, the air smells faintly of ink, sweat, and animal tissue. On the table before you lies a dissected rabbit. Nathaniel St leans over it, careful, composed. He is not provincial. He is educated, connected, surgeon and anatomist to King George I. And he believes this case is genuine. He points to structures inside the rabbit's body. He notes what he considers signs that the animal had been nourished within a human womb. He speaks with calm authority, and the men in the room listen, because this is not a village surgeon improvising. This is a royal medical voice. Now picture the psychological weight of that moment. If he is right, he is part of a medical revelation. If he is wrong, he will be remembered for centuries. St. André's involvement marks a shift. The case is no longer exploratory. It is declarative. In late November 1726, he publishes his account defending the authenticity of Mary Toft's rabbit births. Print freezes belief. Once an argument is published, it becomes harder to quietly retreat. Why would he do this? Several reasons are possible. First, maternal impression theory had respected defenders. Validating Mary's case could reinforce an existing intellectual framework. Second, professional rivalry. Supporting a sensational case could elevate him above competing physicians. Third, genuine conviction. Records suggest he believed his anatomical observations supported the claim. And here's the unsettling part. The Enlightenment did not eliminate error. It refined it. Men like Saint André believed in reason, but reason operates within available knowledge. Without embryology, without modern pathology, the boundaries of the possible were softer. So what seems absurd to us could appear merely extraordinary to them. But something else is happening. Satire awakens. Writers begin mocking the physicians involved. Cartoonists exaggerate rabbits leaping from women's skirts. London loves scandal, but it loves exposed foolishness even more. The mood shifts from curiosity to suspicion, and suspicion is corrosive. And here's where it gets complicated. Under stricter supervision in London, Mary's deliveries slow, then stop. Observers ensure she cannot access hidden animal parts. Her body is monitored closely. Days pass, no rabbits. Tension rises in the room. If the phenomenon was genuine, why has it ceased? If it was fraud, how was it executed? The scrutiny intensifies. Sir Richard Manningham becomes more openly doubtful. He begins testing her, setting traps, restricting visitors. The atmosphere hardens. Think of a corporate scandal unfolding in real time. A CEO publicly defends a bold claim. Press conferences reinforce confidence. Then internal audits begin. Data is rechecked. Whistleblowers surface. And silence grows louder than headlines. Saint André has attached his name to the phenomenon. Now he must defend it against emerging skepticism. The louder the defense, the sharper the eventual fall. By December 1726, Mary Toft was under intense observation in London. Sir Richard Manningham reportedly arranged controlled conditions to prevent her from accessing animal remains. Accounts suggest that during this period, a porter was caught attempting to smuggle a rabbit into her quarters. Soon after, Mary confessed. Sources vary on the details of the confession. Some suggest she admitted to inserting rabbit parts into her body with assistance. Others emphasize pressure and fear during interrogation. Historians debate how coerced her confession may have been. But what is clear is this: the deliveries ceased under scrutiny, and the narrative unraveled. Now imagine Saint André reading the confession. Imagine the quiet, the tightening of his jaw, the awareness that pamphlets will soon turn merciless, because London does not forgive public error easily. And this error was spectacular. The medical establishment pivots. Distance is created. Responsibility narrows. Mary becomes the villain. The foolish doctors become victims of deceit. But the satire does not spare them. Caricatures portray Saint André as naive. Pamphlets ridicule elite medicine. The rabbit births become shorthand for gullibility. And here is the deeper issue. If trained surgeons can be deceived by a poor woman from Surrey, what does that say about the stability of knowledge itself? When knowledge is uncertain, power performs certainty. But when certainty collapses, power scrambles for blame. And what of Mary? Was she mastermind, pawn, desperate, terrified? Records suggest she later claimed that another woman encouraged the deception. Some accounts describe her as frightened and pressured. We must tread carefully, because history often assigns villainy to those with the least power. And Mary had very little. Nathaniel St publicly defends the rabbit births. Mary is placed under strict supervision in London. Deliveries stop. Suspicion crystallizes. A confession emerges. The case begins to collapse. And the ridicule machine starts turning. But confession is not the end. It is the beginning of humiliation. Because now, London wants someone to pay. And in the next phase of this story, reputations will burn in print. A crowd gathers around a print shop window. Pinned to the glass, a satirical engraving, a woman birthing rabbits, a doctor chasing them with a net. Laughter ripples down the street. The miracle has become a joke. It's December 1726. You're standing in a London coffee house near Covent Garden. The air is thick with tobacco smoke and the bitter scent of roasted beans. Porcelain cups clink. Pages rustle. Voices overlap in sharp bursts of opinion. A pamphlet is being read aloud. The reader pauses for dramatic effect as the room leans in. And thus the learned physicians were made fools by a countrywoman. Some laugh, some bristle, some glance sideways, wondering which doctor in the room might be implicated. This is not merely gossip. It is reputation warfare. And you can feel it, the shift in tone. Curiosity has hardened into critique. By the 1720s, London's print industry is thriving. Cheap pamphlets, broadsides, engravings, they circulate rapidly and widely. Literacy rates are rising. Coffee houses serve as intellectual hubs where news is performed aloud. The Mary Toft case arrives at the perfect moment. It has everything: the body, the bizarre, the elite, the rural, poor, royal involvement. And so it becomes content. Satirical artists produce caricatures of rabbit-filled wombs and bewildered surgeons. Writers frame the case as proof of professional arrogance. Some pamphlets exaggerate the absurdity for humor. Others present moral warnings. The narrative fractures. Because once public mockery begins, authority trembles. Here's what most people miss. The ridicule was not only aimed at Mary, it targeted the medical establishment. This was a moment when surgeons and physicians were trying to elevate their status. They were distancing themselves from barber surgeons and folk healers. They were asserting expertise. And suddenly, they looked gullible. That is dangerous, because professional authority depends on trust. And here's where it gets complicated. The medical community cannot simply blame Mary and move on. Too many respected names were involved. Too many letters were written. Too many public defenses published. Nathaniel St. André's reputation suffers deeply. His career never fully recovers. Sir Richard Manningham, who expressed skepticism earlier, emerges relatively intact. The difference? Timing. Public positioning. Who hesitated? Who declared? And this is where the machinery of belief reveals itself. Belief spreads socially, but so does blame. Consider a modern corporate scandal. An executive publicly endorses a flawed product. Another executive raises cautious concerns early. When the product fails, one becomes the face of incompetence. The other becomes the voice of prudence. Same event, different narrative framing. In 1726, pamphlets function like viral threads dissecting the failure, and reputations trend upward or downward accordingly. After Mary's confession in December 1726, she was charged with fraud and briefly imprisoned. Exact legal outcomes remain somewhat unclear. Records suggest she was eventually released without a major long-term sentence. Nathaniel St. faced public mockery in print. Satirical engravings from late 1726 and early 1727 depict him absurdly pursuing rabbits. Historians debate whether he truly believed Mary until the end, or privately doubted sooner. Sources disagree on how much self-protection influenced later statements. But what is certain is this: the case became a cautionary tale, not about rabbits, about credibility. Now step back, ask a harder question. Why did so many intelligent people accept the possibility? even briefly, not because they were foolish, but because the framework allowed it. Maternal impression theory was mainstream. Medical science was evolving but incomplete. Reputation pressures discouraged immediate dismissal, and spectacle clouded skepticism. Belief did not arise from ignorance alone. It arose from structure. When knowledge is uncertain, power performs certainty, but performance can outrun evidence. And what of Mary Toft? After confession, she is no longer fascinating. She is inconvenient. Newspapers lose interest. Pamphlets move on. Her poverty returns to center stage. Records suggest she eventually went back to Surrey. Her later life fades into obscurity. And this is where history grows quiet. The system that amplified her voice now withdraws it. She becomes a footnote. The doctors become punchlines. The lesson becomes folklore. But beneath the laughter, something deeper remains. A society briefly revealed how fragile its certainty truly was. Picture the final London days of the scandal. Ink drying on mocking illustrations. Doctors avoiding certain coffee houses. Mary sitting in a holding cell, the echo of public attention fading. Silence settling where noise once roared. And in that silence, a reckoning. Not just with fraud, with vulnerability. The Mary Toft case explodes in London print culture. Satire targets both Mary and elite physicians. Reputations rise and fall based on timing and positioning. Mary confesses and fades from public focus. The medical establishment absorbs the embarrassment, and England learns, or thinks it learns, a lesson. But we are not finished, because beneath the mockery lies a deeper question. What does this episode reveal about fear, class, and the performance of authority in 18th century England? To understand that, we must finally look directly at Mary Toft herself. Not a spectacle, not a scandal, but as a human being. A woman sits alone in a dim room. No crowd, no surgeons, no pamphlets, just the sound of her breathing. For months, the nation watched her body, but almost no one asked who she was. It's early 1727. You are walking a muddy road back toward Godalming in Surrey. The winter air is sharp. Frost grips the edges of hedgerows. Smoke curls from low cottage chimneys. The ground is hard beneath your boots. Mary Toft has returned. No procession, no spectacle, no doctors. Just a woman stepping back into obscurity. Imagine entering her cottage now. The room looks smaller than before. Straw mattress, worn wool blankets, a cradle, the faint smell of livestock drifting from outside. This is not the home of a mastermind criminal genius. It is the home of rural poverty. And that matters, because to understand what happened in 1726, we have to sit inside her circumstances. Mary Toft was reportedly born around 1701. She was married to Joshua Toft, a cloth worker. They already had children before the rabbit affair. This was not a woman seeking fame. Fame did not benefit rural women. It exposed them. In 18th century England, poverty meant fragility. Medical care was inconsistent. Work was unstable. Childbirth was dangerous and common. If a pregnancy went wrong, the consequences were severe, socially and economically. And here's something historians debate. Some suggest Mary may have miscarried before the alleged rabbit births began. Sources disagree on the details. But imagine the psychological weight of repeated pregnancies, possible loss, and physical strain. Now imagine the attention that followed the first rabbit delivery. Doctors arrive, people listen. For perhaps the first time, her body commands authority figures. This is not justification, but it is context. Here's what most people miss. Agency in history is rarely pure. Was Mary a calculated fraud? Possibly. Did she have help? Some accounts suggest accomplices, perhaps a relative or acquaintance smuggling rabbit parts. Was she pressured by local figures seeking notoriety? It's unclear. Records are inconsistent. Confessions under interrogation are never simple. We must tread carefully. Because history often simplifies poor women into villains when they disrupt systems. And this case disrupted everything. And here's where it gets complicated. Consider what it would take to carry out such a deception. The insertion of animal parts, repeated performances of labor, maintaining consistency under observation, enduring invasive examinations by male physicians. This is not a harmless prank. It would have required endurance, physical pain, psychological strain. If she orchestrated it, she paid for it bodily. If she was manipulated, she bore the consequences alone. Either scenario reveals something unsettling about the structures around her. Think of modern viral hoaxes. Often, the central figure becomes the face of deception, but later investigations reveal networks, enablers, profiteers, opportunists. The spotlight isolates one person. The system that amplified them fades into background. Mary Toft became the villain in Pamphlets. The doctors became embarrassed professionals. But the broader culture that made belief plausible? It moved on without penalty. After her confession in December 1726, Mary was charged with fraud and briefly imprisoned. Records indicate she was eventually released without a severe long-term sentence. Why? Historians debate this. Perhaps authorities feared further embarrassment in a prolonged trial. Perhaps evidence was messy. Perhaps they simply wanted the spectacle to end. After 1727, Mary largely disappears from major historical records. She is believed to have lived until 1763, though documentation is sparse. No memoir, no letter, no personal account in her own voice survives. Everything we know comes from others, doctors, pamphleteers, officials. And that absence is telling. Now imagine being Mary during the height of the scandal. Men in wigs leaning over you, discussing your womb like a scientific specimen, printing pamphlets about your body, satirizing you in illustrations. Whether she orchestrated the deception or not, she became an object, and objects do not control narratives. There is another possibility historians consider cautiously. Psychological factors. In a world without modern psychiatric frameworks, attention could become currency. Suffering could become visibility. Visibility could become power, even if temporary. If Mary initially exaggerated a symptom and found that it brought authority figures to her door, how far might she go? And once doctors publicly defended her case, how difficult would it be to stop? Because now it wasn't just her secret, it was theirs too. When knowledge is uncertain, power performs certainty. But once power commits, retreat becomes dangerous. Mary may have been trapped inside a story too big to control. Step back again. Picture the cottage in Surrey months later. Life returning to ordinary rhythm. Harvest, winter, children, playing. No rabbits, no surgeons, just silence. The country moves on, but something fundamental has shifted because the Mary Toft affair exposed a fault line between authority and evidence. And fault lines don't disappear, they wait. Mary Toft was a poor rural woman whose body became a national spectacle. Her motives remain debated. Her confession ended the public crisis. She faded into obscurity, but the system that amplified her story revealed its own fragility. This was not just a hoax. Now we turn back to London, because the spectacle did not end with confession. It transformed, satire hardened, reputations shattered, and the rabbit births became a weapon in broader battles over science and authority. The humiliation phase is about to begin. A crowd surges outside a townhouse. Someone shouts, "Show us the rabbit woman." A pamphlet seller waves fresh prints in the air. Inside, a woman sits under watch. Outside, her story is no longer hers. It's November 1726 again. But now you're standing in the street. Cold air bites your face. Coal smoke hangs low. Boots scrape against damp cobblestones. A horse snorts impatiently beside a carriage. People gather in clusters. Merchants, servants, students. Curious aristocrats peering from sedan chairs. You hear laughter. You hear debate. You hear disbelief dressed as certainty. Someone reads aloud from a newly printed broadside describing Mary Toft's monstrous births. The word monstrous lingers. Not just strange, not just unusual, monstrous. In early modern language, a monstrous birth often meant a sign, an omen, a rupture in natural order. And that's when you realize this isn't just gossip, it's theatre. London in 1726 thrives on spectacle. Public executions draw crowds. Exotic animals are displayed for a fee. Medical curiosities attract paying observers. The line between science and entertainment is thinner than we might assume. Mary Toft's body becomes an event. People attempt to gain access. Doctors restrict entry, partly to control the investigation, partly to maintain exclusivity. Exclusivity enhances prestige, and prestige enhances authority. But exclusivity also fuels suspicion. If the public cannot see freely, imagination fills the gap. Satirists seize that gap. Print shops produce engravings mocking physicians as gullible. Writers frame the event as emblematic of elite incompetence. The spectacle begins to turn against its architects. Here's what most people miss. Spectacle creates momentum. Momentum resists pause. Once London is invested, the story cannot simply disappear quietly. Even as deliveries stop under supervision, even as doubts sharpen, the public machine keeps spinning, because attention demands continuation. And in 1726, attention spreads through ink. And here's where it gets complicated. The physicians now face two audiences. Each other, the public. Internally, they debate anatomical details. Externally, they defend credibility. Nathaniel St. stands publicly by his findings. Sir Richard Manningham tightens observation. Other medical figures hesitate to commit fully either way, because aligning with the wrong side could destroy a career. And this is the turning point. The case stops being about rabbits. It becomes a referendum on medical modernity. Is England enlightened or embarrassingly credulous? When knowledge is uncertain, power performs certainty, but the performance now feels strained. Think about modern viral controversies. A public figure makes an extraordinary claim. Experts split. Social media amplifies every twist. Memes spread faster than facts. And eventually, the debate becomes less about truth and more about who looks foolish. Now pause for a moment. If you were a respected physician in 1726, would you publicly dismiss the case immediately and risk being wrong? Or cautiously investigate and risk ridicule? I'm curious where you'd stand. Let me know your instinct as we move deeper into this unraveling. By late November, and early December 1726, Mary Toft was housed under controlled observation in Leicester Fields. Nathaniel St had published his defence. Satirical prints circulated widely in London. Skeptical physicians intensified restrictions around Mary. Some reports describe attempts to smuggle rabbits into her quarters being intercepted. Soon after, her confession followed. But here's something historians debate. Was the confession immediate and voluntary, or was it extracted under pressure? Sources vary. What is clear is that the spectacle had become unsustainable, and the longer it continued, the greater the risk to elite credibility. Picture the final days before collapse. The room is quiet, no new deliveries, physicians waiting. Mary watched constantly. Outside, London grows restless. Satirists sharpen their pens. The public senses something. A performance cannot stall forever. It must escalate or end. There is a subtle cruelty in this phase. The crowd does not care about Mary's safety. The pamphleteers do not care about her dignity. The physicians care about proof. The monarchy cares about embarrassment. She is surrounded by interest larger than herself. And once the confession comes, the crowd will pivot instantly. From fascination to mockery. Spectacle is generous when rising. It is merciless when falling. London turns Mary Toft into a spectacle. Print culture amplifies and distorts the case. Physicians defend, hesitate, or prepare for reversal. Public fascination shifts towards skepticism. The performance strains under scrutiny, and collapse is imminent. In the next phase, the confession lands. But confession does not restore order. It ignites humiliation. And humiliation in a reputation-driven society can be more destructive than deception. A door closes. A guard takes position outside. Inside the room, Mary Toft is no longer free to move without eyes on her. And for the first time since the rabbits began appearing, nothing happens. It's early December 1726. You're standing in a controlled lodging in Leicester Fields, London. The room is spare. Whitewashed walls, a narrow bed, a small fire struggling against winter damp. The air smells faintly of ash and stale wool. A physician sits at a table. Another stands by the window. A midwife waits quietly in the corner. Mary lies on the bed. Hours pass, then days. No labor pains, no animal parts, no rabbits. The silence grows heavy because the case depended on continuation. Without new evidence, belief has nowhere to go. Sir Richard Manningham, increasingly skeptical, tightens restrictions around Mary. Servants are monitored, visitors limited, food and materials inspected. Some historical accounts mention a porter allegedly caught attempting to smuggle a rabbit into her quarters. Historians debate the reliability of that specific detail, but the pattern is clear. The environment becomes controlled, and under control, the phenomenon stops. This is a crucial shift. Earlier deliveries occurred in Surrey, where supervision was looser. In London, under elite scrutiny, the event cannot reproduce itself, and that absence speaks loudly. Here's the unsettling part. The physicians now face a choice. Admit they were deceived, or search for increasingly elaborate explanations. Human psychology tends toward preservation, especially when reputation is on the line. Nathaniel St. initially resists doubt. He had published, publicly, his name is attached. To reverse course would be to confess professional failure. And so hesitation lingers, but silence accumulates. And here's where it gets complicated. pressure moves inward. Mary is interrogated. Accounts vary, but by mid-December 1726, she confesses to fraud. Some sources suggest she admitted inserting rabbit parts into her body with assistance. Others imply she implicated accomplices. There are claims she said another woman encouraged her to continue. Historians disagree on how voluntary this confession was. Was she threatened, coerced, simply exhausted? What we know for certain is that once the confession is recorded, the structure collapses, because belief requires ambiguity. Confession destroys ambiguity. Imagine a high-profile investigation today. A public figure denies wrongdoing for weeks. Supporters rally. Opponents speculate. Then, under questioning, a confession emerges. Suddenly, the narrative flips. Supporters distance themselves. Critics feel vindicated. Media tone shifts from curiosity to condemnation. The same crowd that leaned forward in wonder now leans back in judgment. 1726. London behaves no differently. Only the speed is slower. The psychology is identical. It was a mirror. Mary Toft's confession occurred in December 1726. She was charged with fraud and briefly imprisoned. No severe long-term sentence appears in surviving records. Nathaniel St. André's reputation suffered dramatically. Satirical pamphlets mocked his anatomical certainty. Sir Richard Manningham emerged comparatively less damaged, having expressed caution. Printed engravings from 1727 depict the entire episode as farce. Historians emphasize that the case became shorthand for professional embarrassment, but something deeper lingers. Because the system did not merely fail to detect fraud, it publicly amplified it. Picture the moment the confession becomes public. A messenger carries news to a print shop. Compositors set new type. Pamphlets roll off the press. The tone changes instantly, from extraordinary discovery to astonishing deception. The same event, reframed. Authority now scrambles to contain fallout. When knowledge is uncertain, power performs certainty. But when certainty proves hollow, the humiliation is not quiet. Satirists are merciless. Saint André becomes a caricature. Elite medicine becomes punchline. And here's the deeper wound. The Enlightenment project, the idea that reason can master nature, briefly looks fragile. If trained surgeons can be fooled by rabbits, what else might they misunderstand? Confidence in authority is subtle. It erodes slowly. This episode becomes a cultural memory, a warning against credulity, but also a reminder of human vulnerability. And what of Mary in this moment? No longer fascinating, now disposable. The public, which once clamored for access, turns away, because scandal is exciting. Aftermath is not. Her confession satisfies curiosity, but it does not restore dignity. Under strict London supervision, the rabbit deliveries stop. Suspicion solidifies. Mary confesses in December 1726. Public opinion flips from fascination to ridicule. Medical authority absorbs a humiliating blow. The spectacle collapses, but the consequences are only beginning, because confession answers one question. It does not answer the larger one. Why did so many intelligent people need this to be possible? To understand that, we must look beyond the event and examine the deeper architecture of belief in early modern England. Power performs distance. A quill scratches across paper. Confession of Mary Toft. Ink dries, and with it, an entire illusion hardens into record. It's mid-December 1726. You're standing inside a dim administrative chamber in London. The room is colder than the coffee houses. No crowd, no pamphlet hawkers, just officials, a table, a statement. Mary sits opposite them. Her shoulders are slumped. Her hands rest in her lap. The room smells faintly of ink and damp wool. An official reads back her words. She admits the rabbits were not born of her body. She describes inserting animal parts. She names possible helpers. The atmosphere is not triumphant. It is heavy, because confession doesn't restore dignity. It redistributes blame. Exposure in 1726 does not come from advanced forensic science. It comes from control, restriction, time. When Mary was closely monitored, the phenomenon ceased. That absence undermined earlier certainty, and so suspicion became interrogation. Historians disagree on how much pressure she faced. Interrogation methods of the era were rarely gentle. Yet there is no reliable record of extreme physical coercion in this case. What we know is that once she confessed, officials moved quickly. They needed closure. The longer the case lingered, the greater the institutional embarrassment. And that's the crucial detail. Exposure wasn't just about truth. It was about containment. Here's what most people miss. The confession did not answer every question. It answered enough to halt the spectacle. But how did she execute the deception physically? How many people assisted? When did it begin? Sources disagree. Some accounts may exaggerate for dramatic effect. Others may sanitize to protect reputations. History rarely offers clean transcripts. It offers fragments. And here's where it gets complicated. If Mary acted alone, the deception required extraordinary endurance and precision. If she had help, others escaped lasting punishment. If physicians were merely naive, the story is tragic. If they ignored doubts to protect theory or prestige, it is something darker. The truth likely lies somewhere in between. Because large-scale public mistakes rarely rest on a single pair of shoulders. They emerge from networks, and networks protect themselves. Consider modern corporate crises. A faulty product is exposed. An internal report surfaces. The company announces accountability. One executive resigns. The system survives. The public feels closure. But the deeper structural incentives that produce the error, they often remain intact. In 1726, Mary Toft becomes the focal point of blame. The doctors absorb ridicule, but the broader cultural conditions, the hunger for spectacle, the fragility of authority, the limits of medical knowledge, remain unchanged. Mary Toft's confession was recorded in December 1726. She was charged with fraud and briefly imprisoned. There is no evidence of a severe long-term punishment. Nathaniel St. André's reputation never fully recovered. His association with the case became a stain on his career. Satirical prints and pamphlets from 1727 immortalized the episode as absurdity. The rabbit births entered British folklore. Yet within a year, public attention shifted elsewhere. Political tensions resumed center stage. News cycles moved on, and Mary Toft returned to obscurity. Picture London in January 1727. Coffee houses discuss a new topic. The rabbit woman becomes yesterday's joke. Ink-stained engravings are tucked away. The city exhales. But beneath the surface, something lingers, a quiet discomfort. Because for weeks, respected men defended the impossible, and everyone watched. Once the confession circulates, the narrative reframes. Mary is labeled deceitful. Some pamphlets depict her as morally corrupt. The physicians reposition themselves as victims of cunning. Responsibility narrows downward. Upward structures remain stable. When knowledge is uncertain, power performs certainty. When certainty collapses, power performs innocence. That shift is subtle, but it matters, because it reveals how institutions survive embarrassment. They isolate error. They minimize systemic reflection. They move forward. And what of the deeper lesson? Did maternal impression theory collapse overnight? No. It persisted for decades. Beliefs rarely vanish because of one scandal. They adapt. They soften. They fade gradually. The Mary Toft affair did not end superstition. It merely dented confidence. Mary Toft confessed. In December 1726, the spectacle halted. Physicians faced ridicule. Institutional embarrassment was contained. Mary was briefly imprisoned and then largely forgotten. But the deeper structures that made belief possible endured. So now we must ask a harder question. If this episode did not fundamentally transform science overnight, what did it change? And what does it reveal about how societies process humiliation? Because the aftershocks of ridicule can reshape authority in ways no single confession can. An engraving is unveiled in a print shop window. A physician kneels on the floor. Rabbits leap around him. The crowd roars with laughter. In 1727, humiliation is public entertainment. It's early 1727. You're standing in a narrow London street near a busy print shop. Cold wind pushes through your coat. The scent of ink drifts outward as fresh sheets are hung to dry. People press close to the window. Inside the frame of one engraving, a woman lies in exaggerated pose while rabbits spill absurdly from beneath her skirts. Beside her, a doctor, wig askew, looks bewildered. The image is ridiculous, and that is precisely the point. A young apprentice laughs loudly. An older gentleman shakes his head. A surgeon passing by does not stop, because laughter can wound. And satire in 18th century London is sharp. The Mary Toft case becomes fuel for satire. Caricaturists and pamphleteers seize the opportunity. Some engravings target Mary directly. Others mock Nathaniel St. André. Some ridicule elite medicine more broadly. Satire functions as social correction. When elites appear arrogant or foolish, print culture drags them back to earth. But satire also simplifies. Complex medical debates collapse into punchlines. Nuance disappears. The public remembers rabbits, not maternal impression theory, not structural pressures, just rabbits. And here's what's important. In a society increasingly proud of its intellectual progress, this scandal becomes a cautionary tale, a reminder that modernity is fragile. Here's what most people miss. Mockery restores balance. When authority overreaches, laughter levels it. But laughter can also obscure. The deeper institutional questions, how evidence was evaluated, how professional rivalry influenced decisions, get buried beneath cartoons. Humiliation satisfies the crowd. Reflection requires patience. And patience is rare in spectacle-driven cultures. That was true in 1727. It is true now. And here's where it gets complicated. Nathaniel St. André's career suffers significantly. His credibility weakens. His name becomes linked permanently to the rabbit affair. Sir Richard Manningham, having expressed skepticism earlier, preserves more of his reputation. The difference again lies in public positioning. One man published certainty, the other hesitated. In a reputation economy, timing is everything. But consider this. Was St. André uniquely foolish? or uniquely visible, he became the face of the era. But he was not alone in early belief. The system required a symbol of failure. He fit the role. Think about modern viral scandals. A high-profile executive or expert becomes the meme. Late-night hosts mock them. Social media reduces years of professional achievement to a single blunder. The internet rarely distinguishes between error and identity. The same dynamic operates in 18th century London, only with copper engravings instead of tweets. Reputation, once cracked publicly, rarely returns to its original shape. Satirical prints from 1727 depicted the Mary Toft affair as farce. Pamphlets circulated widely mocking physicians. St. André's earlier publication defending the case became a liability. Mary Toft herself faded from satire quickly compared to the physicians, though she remained associated with deceit in print. Historians note that the episode became embedded in British cultural memory as an example of medical credulity. Yet formal institutional collapse did not follow. Hospitals remained. The Royal Society continued. Medical advancement progressed. Embarrassment bruised individuals more than structures. And that distinction is critical. Picture the emotional toll. A respected surgeon walking into a coffee house. Whispers stop. Someone smirks. An engraving circulates with his name attached to absurdity. Authority is not only intellectual, it is social. And once social confidence fractures, expertise feels thinner. When knowledge is uncertain, power performs certainty. But after humiliation, power performs resilience. Institutions survive by absorbing shame into individuals. There is another uncomfortable truth. Mary Toft's body became a stage, but after confession, male reputations dominated the conversation. Pamphlets debated whether physicians were fools. The medical profession's honor became central. Mary became symbol. Her socio-economic reality faded. The scandal reveals a pattern common in history. Women's bodies generate spectacle. Men's reputations generate debate. That asymmetry lingers. Now step back. The laughter fades. The engravings yellow with time. The scandal recedes into anecdote. But something subtle has shifted. The medical community grows more cautious about public claims. Public trust becomes more fragile. And future extraordinary cases will be met with sharper skepticism. Not because science suddenly becomes perfect, but because humiliation leaves scars. Satire explodes after Mary Toft's confession. Nathaniel St.'s reputation suffers deeply. Medical authority absorbs public embarrassment. Institutions survive. The case becomes cultural shorthand for gullibility. And beneath the laughter, deeper questions remain unresolved. Because humiliation teaches. But what exactly did England learn from this episode? Did it strengthen scientific rigor, or simply harden professional defensiveness? To answer that, we must examine how this scandal reshaped the practice and performance of science itself. A dissection theatre, tiered wooden benches, a body laid out under cold light. Students lean forward. After the rabbits, something in the room feels different, more cautious, more defensive. It's the late 1720s. You're seated high in a London anatomy theatre. The air is sharp with the scent of preservatives and human proximity. Wax drips from candles. The wooden benches creak beneath shifting weight. Below, a surgeon prepares to demonstrate a procedure. His tone is measured, careful, precise. You sense something subtle in the performance, a need to reassure. Because only months earlier, London's medical elite stood publicly behind an impossibility. Now, Every claim must sound firmer. Every demonstration must appear grounded. Authority, once bruised, becomes hyper-aware of its posture. The Mary Toft affair did not instantly revolutionize medical science. There was no dramatic reform law passed in 1727, no immediate collapse of maternal impression theory. Beliefs fade gradually, not theatrically. Maternal impression continued to appear in medical discussions for decades, but the rabbit scandal left a mark. It became a reference point, a warning. When future extraordinary claims emerged, skeptics could invoke 1726. Remember the rabbits, and that memory subtly shaped professional caution. Historians argue that the case contributed to a growing insistence on controlled observation, not because science was born in that moment, but because embarrassment accelerates methodological tightening. Here's what most people miss. The Enlightenment was not a straight line upward. It was iterative, messy, human. The same era that celebrated reason also wrestled with uncertainty. Doctors genuinely sought truth, but they lacked tools we take for granted. Without microscopy at modern precision, without germ theory, without embryology, they reasoned within limited frameworks, and sometimes those frameworks misled them. The rabbits did not expose stupidity, they exposed the limits of available knowledge. And here's where it gets complicated. Public ridicule can produce two different outcomes: increased rigor, increased defensiveness. Which one prevailed? Likely both. Some physicians became more cautious about public declarations. Others grew wary of sensational cases. But professional rivalry did not disappear. The desire for discovery did not fade. And spectacle did not vanish from medicine. Because medicine has always balanced two forces: curiosity and credibility. The Mary Toft case destabilized that balance temporarily, but it did not eliminate tension. Consider modern scientific controversies. A flawed study makes headlines. Later, replication fails. The study is retracted. Public trust wavers. What follows? New protocols, stronger peer review, but also sometimes institutional defensiveness. The system adapts. It rarely transforms completely. 1726 functions the same way. The rabbit scandal nudges medicine toward greater caution, but it does not erase error from human inquiry. Nathaniel St.'s published defense remained part of the record. Satirical prints from 1727 ensured the scandal would not be forgotten. Maternal impression theory continued in medical discourse into the later 18th century. Only with advances in embryology and reproductive science in the 19th century did such theories fully recede. Historians often cite the Mary Toft affair as an example of early modern medical credulity, but also as evidence of emerging scientific self-correction. Because the case ultimately collapsed through observation. Under controlled conditions, the phenomenon stopped. Evidence prevailed, albeit slowly. That matters. Now imagine a young medical student in 1730 hearing the story. Not as scandal, but as caution. He learns not only anatomy, he learns reputational risk. He learns that public certainty carries consequences, and that lesson may shape his future restraint. When knowledge is uncertain, power performs certainty. But after humiliation, performance becomes measured. The Mary Toft episode also contributed to growing skepticism toward monstrous births as divine signs. Earlier centuries often framed unusual births as omens. By the 18th century, Naturalistic explanations were increasingly preferred. The rabbit affair reinforced the idea that extraordinary claims required extraordinary scrutiny. It did not end superstition, but it nudged the cultural pendulum, incrementally, quietly. And that's how real change often occurs, not with a proclamation, with accumulation. And yet, something uncomfortable remains. The system corrected itself, eventually, but only after public embarrassment. Does progress require humiliation? Or is humiliation merely the cost of visibility? That question lingers far beyond 1726. The Mary Toft scandal did not instantly transform science. Maternal impression theory persisted, but professional caution increased. Public scrutiny intensified. The case became a cautionary reference point. Medicine adapted, not dramatically, but meaningfully. And the tension between curiosity and credibility remained. So if science adjusted slowly, what about power itself? How did institutions absorb this shock without collapsing? And what does that reveal about the performance of authority then and now? A physician straightens his wig before entering a crowded room. He hasn't changed his knowledge, only his posture. And sometimes, posture is everything. It's London, early 1727. You're standing inside a refined drawing room lit by chandeliers. The air smells faintly of beeswax and expensive perfume. Gentle murmurs ripple through a gathering of educated men. A physician begins to speak. Measured tone, calm expression, confident pacing. He references anatomy, observation, method. No mention of rabbits, but everyone in the room remembers. Authority here is not only about facts, it is about performance, how you hold yourself, how you frame uncertainty, how convincingly you speak. In 1726, several physicians spoke with certainty about the impossible. In 1727, that certainty must be recalibrated, not erased, refined. The Mary Toft affair exposed something profound. Medical authority in early modern England was not built solely on knowledge. It was built on trust, on demeanor, on perceived rationality, on class presentation. Physicians wore wigs and fine coats. They spoke Latin. They embodied confidence. Surgeons like John Howard operated closer to tradesmen. Midwives existed largely outside elite institutions. The hierarchy was visible. When Nathaniel St published his defense of the rabbit births, he leveraged that hierarchy. If a royal surgeon believes this, surely it carries weight. But once the case collapsed, the performance cracked. The public saw uncertainty, and uncertainty, once exposed, cannot be unseen. When knowledge is uncertain, power performs certainty. But what happens when the performance falters? Here's what most people miss. The scandal did not destroy medical authority. It clarified its fragility. Institutions survive not by being infallible, but by managing failure. After the confession, physicians distanced themselves from Mary. They reframed the narrative. They emphasized investigation over endorsement. They repositioned themselves as seekers of truth, misled by deception. And slowly, confidence returned, not because the error vanished, but because the story was reshaped. And here's where it gets complicated. Authority depends on selective memory. The public remembers rabbits. The institution remembers methodology. Over time, the narrative shifts from doctors were fooled to doctors exposed a fraud. It's subtle but powerful because framing determines legacy. If the story is about gullibility, authority weakens. If the story is about eventual correction, authority strengthens. And guess which version institutions prefer? Consider modern public health crises. An early misjudgment occurs. Officials make confident statements that later require revision. Public trust wavers. Institutions respond with new guidelines, task forces, transparency pledges. Over time, the narrative becomes one of adaptation, not failure, because institutions rarely admit collapse. They narrate resilience. The Mary Toft case followed the same pattern. Embarrassment, containment, reframing, recovery. Nathaniel St.'s career suffered, but the broader medical establishment endured. The Royal Society continued its work. Medical publications expanded in the 18th century. Maternal impression theory gradually weakened as anatomical science improved. The rabbit affair remained in pamphlets and satire, but not as an institutional death blow. Historians often describe the case as illustrative of early modern tensions between superstition and emerging empiricism. But it is also illustrative of institutional durability. The system bent. It did not break. Now imagine being a young physician in 1735. You have heard the rabbit story. You know reputations can crumble. You learn to hedge your claims, to avoid theatrical certainty, to present skepticism as sophistication. The scandal becomes professional folklore. And folklore shapes behavior quietly. Power does not eliminate risk, it manages optics. Authority is relational. It exists because people agree to grant it. In 1726, people granted authority to physicians because they appeared rational and learned. When that image cracked, satire threatened the agreement. But the agreement was not withdrawn. Why? Because alternatives were weaker. There was no competing system ready to replace elite medicine, so the public mocked and then returned. Authority, once questioned, often survives by default. Step back further. The Mary Toft scandal reveals something enduring. Societies want certainty, especially about the body, especially about birth. When certainty falters, anxiety rises, and someone must step forward to restore order, even if that restoration requires narrative adjustment. When knowledge is uncertain, power performs certainty. But survival depends on flexibility. The rabbit scandal exposed the performative nature of authority. Medical credibility cracked, but did not collapse. Institutions reframed the story. Public trust wavered, then stabilized. Power absorbed humiliation and adapted, and the system moved forward. But one question remains. If institutions recovered, what happened to the human beings caught in the fallout? To understand the full cost of this episode, we must examine the quiet aftermath, the years when the noise faded and only consequences remained. A cottage door closes, no crowd, no pamphlets, no doctors, only wind moving through bare branches. History grows quiet. It's the early 1730s. You're walking again through rural Surrey. The fields are green in spring. Sheep move slowly across the hills. The air smells of wet earth and wood smoke. Church bells ring with indifferent rhythm. Life continues. You pass cottages that look like Mary Toft's. Laundry hangs. Children run. Men mend fences. Nothing in the landscape suggests that only a few years earlier, this region was the center of a national scandal. Now imagine stepping into her home. The fire crackles softly. A wooden table. Rough plates. Ordinary life. If Mary Toft stands there, she is no longer spectacle. She is simply a woman among many. And that ordinariness is almost harder to process than the scandal itself. After her confession in December 1726 and brief imprisonment, Mary Toft largely disappears from major public documentation. Records suggest she eventually returned to Surrey. Some historians believe she lived until 1763, though documentation is sparse and debated. No memoir survives, no letters in her own voice, no dramatic final chapter. The archive thins, and this thinning matters because scandal amplifies people temporarily, but poverty erases them quietly. The same system that projected her body into national consciousness allowed her to dissolve once she was no longer useful. Here's what most people miss. Disappearance is not neutrality, it is consequence. For Nathaniel St. André, humiliation followed him in print. For Mary Toft, obscurity swallowed her. Which is worse, public mockery that scars your professional identity, or historical silence that erases your interior life? History often preserves the reputations of men. It rarely preserves the reflections of women like Mary. And here's where it gets complicated. The Mary Toft affair became folklore. But folklore simplifies. It transforms a complex intersection of class, gender, and institutional fragility into a cautionary anecdote. Doctors once believed a woman gave birth to rabbits. The deeper context, maternal impression theory, Enlightenment tension, print culture dynamics, fades. The story becomes absurdity stripped of nuance. That simplification protects institutions. It also flattens individuals. When knowledge is uncertain, power performs certainty. But when scandal fades, power performs amnesia. Think about modern viral figures. For a few weeks, they dominate headlines. Then the cycle moves on. Years later, few remember their names. The meme survives. The person disappears. Mary Toft became the meme. The rabbits endured in British cultural memory. Her lived experience did not. That asymmetry is not accidental. It reflects how societies metabolize embarrassment. They keep the punchline. They discard the complexity. That dynamic repeats across centuries. Mary Toft's documented confession occurred in December 1726. Satirical prints circulated in 1727. After that, references to her diminished significantly in official records. Historians rely on pamphlets, court documents, and medical writings to reconstruct her life. Her death is often cited as occurring in 1763, though detailed confirmation remains limited. Nathaniel St.'s career never fully recovered its former prestige. But elite medicine continued expanding. Hospitals grew. Medical education formalized further. The scandal became a historical footnote, not a structural rupture. That tells us something about institutional resilience. Now stand again in that Surrey field. Wind moves through tall grass. A rabbit darts briefly across your path. Ordinary, unremarkable. Nature restored to its proper place, and yet the memory lingers. Because this wasn't really about rabbits, it was about belief under pressure, about what happens when authority gambles on uncertainty, and about how quickly society pivots from fascination to forgetting. There is a quiet melancholy here, not tragic in a dramatic sense, but reflective. Mary Toft's body became a battleground of ideas. Her confession became a safety valve for institutional embarrassment. Her life afterward returned to anonymity, and we are left with fragments. That incompleteness forces humility. We cannot reconstruct her interior world. We can only reconstruct the forces around her. And sometimes, that is the most honest history can be. After confession and brief imprisonment, Mary Toft faded from public record. The scandal became folklore. Institutions survived. The deeper complexities were simplified into anecdote, and the human being at the center disappeared into rural obscurity. But before we close this story, we must confront its final and most important question. Why did this make sense at the time? What did 1726 England need to believe? And what does that reveal about us? In our final chapter, we step back, not to judge, but to understand. A candle flickers in a dark room. A physician speaks with calm authority. A crowd leans in. No one thinks they are witnessing absurdity. They think they are witnessing possibility. And that difference changes everything. It's 1726 again. You are back in that Surrey cottage. The air is thick. The candle trembles. The midwife lifts something small and strange into the light. No one laughs. No one reaches for satire. They are trying to understand. Because in this moment, within the intellectual framework of their world, this does not feel like comedy. It feels like anomaly. And anomaly invites investigation. Step outside the cottage. The fields stretch quietly. The church bell tolls. The Enlightenment is rising. But it hasn't yet hardened into laboratory certainty. You are living in a world where science is emerging, not established. Where bodies are mysterious. Where pregnancy is perilous. Where imagination is believed to shape flesh. Within that world, the rabbit bursts do not scream impossibility. They whisper disturbance. To modern eyes, the Mary Toft affair appears foolish, but historical understanding demands restraint. In 1726, maternal impression theory was widely discussed. Medical knowledge of embryology was incomplete. Professional medicine was still consolidating authority. Print culture amplified novelty rapidly. Reputation mattered more than institutional transparency. When the first rabbit appeared, it did not collide with a stable wall of established science. It landed in shifting sand. Add to this the psychology of ambition. A provincial surgeon sees an extraordinary case. A royal surgeon sees confirmation of theory. A nation hungry for intellectual progress sees potential discovery. And beneath it all, a poor woman finds herself at the center of attention in a world that rarely looks at women like her. Belief emerges not from stupidity, but from alignment. Alignment between expectation, theory, ego, and opportunity. Here's what most people miss. The case persisted not because no one doubted. It persisted because doubt carried risk. To dismiss the case too quickly risked missing a breakthrough. To endorse it risked humiliation. Faced with uncertainty, institutions hesitated, and hesitation allowed spectacle to grow. When knowledge is uncertain, power performs certainty, but uncertainty itself is human. And 1726 was a deeply human year. And here's where it becomes uncomfortable. Ask yourself, are we immune? Do we not still see extraordinary claims gather believers? Do respected voices not still amplify fragile evidence? Do viral stories not still outrun verification? The mediums change. The psychology does not. We like novelty. We reward bold claims. We conflate confidence with competence. And when exposure comes, we assign blame narrowly and move on. The Mary Toft affair is not an alien story. It is familiar. Today, we have peer review, advanced imaging, genetic science. Yet misinformation spreads. Experts disagree publicly. Institutions scramble to preserve trust. The difference is speed, not structure. In 1726, pamphlets carried the rabbits across England. Today, algorithms would do it in minutes, but the emotional architecture remains intact. Curiosity, ambition, performance, embarrassment, recovery. Mary Toft confessed in December 1726. Nathaniel St. André's reputation suffered. Satirical prints of 1727 immortalized the scandal. Maternal impression theory faded slowly over the following century as embryological science advanced. Mary likely lived quietly in Surrey until her death around 1763. Though records remain limited, the institutions endured. No one there thinks they are foolish. 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 They are. No one there thinks they are foolish. They think they are confronting mystery, and mystery is powerful. This story is not about rabbits. It is about systems under stress, about knowledge in transition, about how authority behaves when certainty wavers, about how quickly fascination turns to mockery, and about how easily individuals, especially those with little power, become vessels for larger anxieties. Mary Toft's body became a stage. Doctors performed confidence upon it. Pamphleteers performed outrage around it. And the public performed belief. When knowledge is uncertain, power performs certainty. But certainty is fragile. And history reminds us, gently, repeatedly, that we are never as far from absurdity as we imagine. If you've listened this far, consider this. What extraordinary claim in our own time feels just plausible enough to tempt belief? And how will it look in hindsight? History is not a gallery of fools, it is a mirror. If this long journey into 1726 has given you something to think about, consider subscribing and joining me for the next deep exploration. In our next documentary, we'll step into another moment where certainty cracked, and a society had to decide what to believe. Until then, stay curious, stay cautious, and remember how easily rabbits can become evidence.